Lac Orivu of Quebec City. For centuries, the ghost of Marie-Joseph Corriveau, known as Lac Orivu, has haunted the cultural consciousness of Quebec, Canada. The legend tells of a woman hanged for murder, with her corpse gruesomely displayed in an iron cage as a warning to others. But behind this tale, there's a story of injustice and tragedy. Born in 1733 in New France, which would later fall under British control, Marie-Joseph married Charles Bouchard at 16. Their marriage ended though with Bouchard's death 11 years later, and legends suggest Marie-Joseph killed him by pouring molten lead in his ear, but there's no actual historical evidence to support this claim. Shortly after though, she married Louis-Étienne Daudier, a union marred by disputes and rumors of abuse. In January 1733, Daudier was found dead in their stable, initially believed to have been kicked in the head by a horse. However, a British doctor reported that Daudier's wounds could not have been made by hooves. Marie-Joseph and her father, Joseph Corriveau, were then arrested on suspicion of murder. Rumors swirled that she had actually killed Daudier with a pitchfork and dragged his body into the stable, letting her father take the blame. The case though was concluded on April 9th, with Joseph Corriveau being sentenced to death for the homicide of his son-in-law. Marie-Joseph was found to be an accomplice to the murder and was sentenced to 60 lashes and branded with the letter M on her hand for murder. One of Joseph Corriveau's nieces, Isabelle Slivian, who worked as his servant, testified but changed her story several times during the hearing. She was found guilty of perjury and received 30 lashes and was branded with the letter P. Before his execution though, Joseph Corriveau confessed to his confessor that he was merely an accomplice, while his daughter Marie-Joseph had actually killed Daudier. This led to a second trial on April 15. During this trial, Marie-Joseph admitted to killing her husband with 2 blows of a hatchet while he was sleeping, citing his ill treatment of her as the reason. The tribunal then found her guilty and sentenced her to hang instead of Joseph. Also, her body was to be hanged in chains, meaning it would be put on public display on a gibbet after her execution. This macabre spectacle, meant to terrify the local population, disgusted many but became part of local folklore from time. Basically, over time, her story transformed into an urban legend, with embellishments such as witchcraft and numerous dead husbands. One popular tale involves a night traveler, François Dubé, who hears an unusual ticking sound. He then realizes that it's probably the wind blowing through Lac Corriveau's cage and bones. Taking pity on her soul, Dubé recites a prayer, and in the dark, Lac Corriveau climbs on his back, asking him to carry her across the St. Lawrence River, where her fellow witches are celebrating. Dubé then faints, and when he awakens, he finds an empty liquor bottle, suggesting Lac Corriveau had been with him. The story is one of the few Quebec folktales with no origins in similar old French legends. Any strange noise at night is basically attributed to the wind blowing through the cage and skeleton of Lac Corriveau. The legend, over 250 years old, still evokes strong emotions in Quebec. It's generally believed that Lac Corriveau was a victim of spousal abuse and did not receive a fair trial, as it was conducted in English, just 4 years after New France fell to the English. The Roman soldiers in York. In the early 1950s, a young apprentice plumber named Harry Martindale was repairing a boiler in the basement of the Treasurer's house, which is near York Minster. Basically, while packing away his tools, he heard what sounded like a trumpet. Initially, he thought it might be a brass band playing outside and paid it little attention. But then came a second, louder blast, seemingly from the far end of the cellar. As he peered into the dimly lit surroundings, Harry saw nothing and was about to continue his work when he suddenly seized with horror. A horse's head emerged from the wall at the far end of the cellar, followed by its rider and 15 Roman soldiers. The soldiers, looking weary and dejected, paid no attention to Harry as they shuffled across the cellar floor, disappearing into the opposite wall. Harry, who was hidden behind the boiler the whole time, watched in shock. Once he composed himself, he gathered his belongings and dashed for the stairs, emerging on the ground floor breathless and confused. He stood outside and pondered the vividness of the experience. Unsure if anyone would believe him, he decided to keep quiet about the incident. 20 years passed before Harry spoke of what he had seen. His silence broke after reading a newspaper article about 2 other people who had similar experiences in the same cellar. Harry described the soldiers in detail, noting their shabby green kilted skirts and the long spears and short swords they carried. They also held round shields, which was uncommon for Roman soldiers. The most curious detail though was that the soldiers appeared to be chopped off at the knee, with the lower parts of their leg disappearing into the stone floor. Around this time, archaeologists were excavating the cellar area and discovered an old Roman road about 18 inches below the modern floor level. This would explain why the soldiers appeared to be cut off at the knee as they were walking on the old road. By then, Harry had become a police officer known for his honesty and integrity. He was interviewed by experts in Roman history who were intrigued by his account. Harry claimed to have little knowledge of Roman history beyond what he had seen in Hollywood movies and had no interest in ghosts or the paranormal. Despite this though, he stood by his story. Experts, after researching, found the auxiliary forces of the Roman army had been based in York towards the end of the Roman occupation. These soldiers would have worn green kilted skirts and carried round shields, matching Harry's description. This discovery lent more credence to his account. Harry's experience with the ghostly soldiers though was pretty unique in his life. He had never encountered anything paranormal before or since that day in the cellar. The soldiers might have been a mercenary force attached to the Roman legion, possibly defeated by the Picts during the collapse of Roman Britain. Their appearance in the cellar though still remains a mystery. Rudolph Voren. Rudolph Voren, also known as Joseph Voren, arrived in a small village in the district of Leba near Frankfurt an der Oder, Germany in 1850, and became the subject of one of the most interesting and mysterious cases of the 19th century. When the German authorities questioned him, Voren claimed to be from Luxaria, a country on the continent of Sacria, separated from Europe by a vast ocean. His goal was to find his long-lost brother, but he had no clear memory of how he ended up in the village, only recalling that his ship had an accident, stranding him there. Voren spoke in barely clear and halting German, and he did not seem to speak any other European language except for German. He stated that he could also read and write in a language he called Luxarian, or Abram, which he described as the language of the people in Luxaria. When asked about his religion, he said it was Christianity, but in Luxaria it was known as Ispasian. Investigators searched for any sort of trace of Luxaria, which Voren said was part of the world called Sacria. However, they could not find any trace of Luxaria or Sacria on any map. Voren described the 5 great regions of the earth as Sacria, Aflar, Aster, Oslar, and Eubler. Author John Timms later wrote about Rudolph Voren in his 1852 Yearbook of Facts in Science and Art, noting that Voren was still the subject of many scientific papers in the Prussian capital. One explanation debated at the time was that he might have been a time traveler who accidentally landed in another dimension and ended up near Frankfurt. Others though speculate that Voren suffered from a mental condition that made him believe in his story, while some thought he was simply a fraud. Despite these theories though, Voren never asked for any financial assistance, which made it difficult to determine his true motives. Voren's story is sometimes cited as proof of the existence of teleportation, parallel universes, and alternate realities. The name Luxaria also has a Latin meaning of luxury, and the names of the continents he mentioned bear some similarities to the known continents, except for Sacria. Taking a deeper dive, you can see how Aflar corresponds to Africa, Aslar to Asia, Oslar to Australia, and Eublar to Europe. But the word Sacria is not really a continent, but something interesting is its reference in ancient Indian and Turkish history. In ancient India, there was a region called Sacria, though Voren did not resemble an Indian, having a very Caucasian appearance. In Turkey, there's also a region known as Sakarya, which was part of the Ottoman territory. The language Voren called Abramian is similar to the Armenian name Abramian. Armenia is also known as the first country to embrace Christianity as a state religion since 301 AD. The fate of Rudolph Voren though remains unclear, similar to the case of the man from Tord. There's no information about whether Voren returned to his country or was detained in Berlin. His mysterious disappearance have left no additional reports or evidence of his whereabouts. So yeah, this story is pretty much still a mystery, with many wondering if it's real proof of cross-dimensional travel. L'Ora do Banero. The legend of Loura do Banheiro is a legend that comes from Brazil and tells the story of a ghostly blonde girl who haunts the bathrooms of schools. The story has various versions, but the main legend centers around a beautiful blonde girl who met a tragic end in her school's bathroom. Depending on the version, she was either a student or a teacher. Her beauty and intelligence made her the target of intense envy from others. In the narrative where she was a student though, it said she was murdered by jealous classmates while skipping class. In the version where she was a teacher though, the story goes that she was killed by students angry over their grades. Another version though suggests her death was accidental, a simple slip and fall resulting in her hitting her head on the toilet. Regardless of how she died though, her death was tragic, but her story did not end there. It said that the girl's spirit did not accept her untimely death and continued to roam the school as if she were still alive. She tried to interact with the surroundings and the people in them, but no one noticed her. This isolation drove her to madness as she could not comprehend why no one acknowledged her presence. She eventually stopped trying to interact with others and confined herself to the place of her death, the bathroom where she had died. Her friends, however, did not forget her and sought ways to communicate with the spirit. They discovered a ritual to summon her, and when performed correctly, this ritual would summon her figure. But the spirit they encountered was no longer the girl they knew. She appeared as a pale, ghostly figure with bloody eyes, cotton stuffed in her nose, and dressed in a white gown. The only recognizable feature was her blonde hair. This legend is believed to have originated from a true story about a girl named Maria Augusta de Oliveira Borges, who lived in Sao Paulo in the late 19th century. Forced by her father to marry a much older man at the age of 14, Maria was deeply unhappy with her marriage. She sold her jewelry and fled to Paris at the age of 18. Maria then died at the age of 26 though, and her mother decided to bring her body back to Brazil. Until the tomb was built, Maria's corpse was kept in a glass urn in the family mansion for public viewing. Over time, her mother decided against burying her daughter, but after numerous alleged sightings of Maria's ghost asking to be buried, the mother finally laid her to rest. A decade later, in 1902, the family house was replaced by a school. Rumors of Maria's spirit haunting the school bathrooms then began to circulate, especially after a mysterious fire damaged part of the building in 1916. According to legend, the spirit of Loura do Banheiro roams the school, turning on faucets to quench her thirst and asking to be buried. Minotaur Maze in Casablanca. The Minotaur Maze in Casablanca is an urban legend that has been circulating in Morocco since August 1968. This legend tells of a hidden labyrinth beneath the city of Casablanca, resembling the one from ancient Greek mythology. The maze is said to be vast with twisting corridors, hidden chambers, and secret passages. It's rumored to be inhabited by strange creatures, including the Minotaur itself. The legend begins with a story about a young boy named Avith. In August 1968, he supposedly discovered a secret room that led to the Minotaur maze while exploring the old Medina of Casablanca. According to the tale, the maze stretches for miles beneath the city, hidden from plain sight. Despite many searches by treasure hunters, archaeologists, and urban explorers though, no concrete evidence has been found to support the existence of this labyrinth. Many believe that the maze is located beneath the Old Medina, a historical area of Casablanca known for its narrow streets and ancient buildings. The Medina's maze-like structure above ground adds to the mystery of the legend. Some claim that the entrances to the labyrinth are hidden within old mosques, abandoned buildings, and other secluded areas. And in Moroccan mythology itself, the Minotaur is often associated with jinn, which are supernatural beings that can inhabit isolated or abandoned places. These creatures are believed to be attracted to certain locations like old ruins or ancient religious sites. Many who have claimed to find the entrance to the maze report feeling an overwhelming sense of dread and disorientation, causing them to abandon their search. In recent years, though, the legend has gained more attention from paranormal investigators and enthusiasts. Some have attempted to use modern technology like ground-penetrating radar to locate the maze. However, these efforts have yet to yield any definitive results. The lack of concrete evidence has not deterred believers though, who argued that the supernatural nature of the maze makes it difficult to detect using conventional methods. Rudolph Fence. Rudolph Fence is the focal character of the short story I'm Scared by Jack Finney, first published in 1959. The narrative centers around the mysterious appearance of a man who seems to have time traveled from the 19th century to the mid-20th century. The story later evolved into an urban legend, though believed by many to be a true account of a man who inexplicably arrived in New York City from the past. In the story, one evening in mid-June 1951, around 11:15 p.m., passers-by in Times Square noticed a man who appeared to be around 29 years old, dressed in the fashion of the late 19th century. This man, who was disoriented and confused, was seen standing in the middle of an intersection and before anyone could intervene, was struck by a taxicab and fatally injured. The officials at the morgue then examined the man's body and found several curious items in his pockets, being a copper token for a beer worth 5 cents from a saloon unknown to even the oldest residents of the area, a bill for the care of a horse and the washing of a carriage from a livery stable on Lexington Avenue not listed in any current address book, about $70 in old banknotes, and business cards with the name Rudolph Fence and an address of 5th Avenue. There was also a letter sent to that address in June 1876 from Philadelphia, and a medal for coming third in a 3-legged race. None of these items though showed any signs of aging, which further mystified the investigators. Captain Hubert V. Rim of the NYPD's Missing Persons Department took charge of the investigation. He discovered that the address of 5th Avenue was now a business, whose current owner did not know Rudolph Fence. Rim also found no records of Fence in the address book, and his fingerprints did not match any on file, and there were also no recent missing person reports that fit his description. Persisting though in his efforts, Rim found a Rudolph Fence Jr. in a telephone book from 1939. Residents of the listed address remembered Fence Jr. as a man about 60 years old who had worked nearby and had moved to an unknown location in 1940. Rim then contacted a bank and learned that Fence Jr. had died 5 years earlier, but his widow was still alive and living in Florida. She informed Rim that her husband's father, Rudolph Fence, had disappeared in 1876 at the age of 29. He had left the house for an evening walk and never returned, despite extensive efforts to locate him. Captain Rim's findings matched the description of the unidentified man found at Times Square, leading him to believe that the deceased was indeed Rudolph Fence from 1876. However, fearing that his supervisors would question his mental competence, Rim never officially recorded the results of his investigation. The story of Rudolph Fence, though, has been referenced in various books, articles, and internet postings since the 1970s. It's often been presented as evidence supporting theories about time travel. In 2000, the Spanish magazine Más Allá published an account of the events as a factual report, prompting folklore researcher Chris Obeck to investigate the story's authenticity. Obeck's research revealed that the Fence story first appeared near the May to June 1972 issue of the Journal of Borderland Research, which was a publication by the Borderland Sciences Research Foundation. The magazine had sourced the story from the 1953 book A Voice from the Gallery by Ralph M. Holland. Obeck concluded that the story was fictional, and further investigation by Pastor George Murphy in 2001 revealed that Ralph M. Holland had actually taken the story from a 1952 Robert Heinlein science fiction anthology titled Tomorrow the Stars, or from a short story printed in Collier's magazine. The original source, which we mentioned earlier, was Jack Finney's short story I'm Scared, which was first published in Collier's magazine on September 15, 1951. Despite the story's fictional origins though, it still persisted as an urban legend. Black Ghost of the Blue Mountain. The story of the Black Ghost of Mount Victoria Pass is part of Australia's colonial history, unfolding within the rugged expanse of the Blue Mountains in New South Wales. This region, which stood as a barrier to early European settlers, became the backdrop for one of Australia's most enduring ghost stories. The Blue Mountains stretch across New South Wales, forming a natural barrier before merging into the Great Dividing Range. During the early 19th century, European colonists, eager to expand their settlements, found the mountains nearly impassable. The solution, though, came in 1813 when explorers Gregory Blackson, William Lawson, and William Charles Wentworth successfully crossed the mountains, paving the way for future settlers. William Cox was later commissioned to construct a road over these mountains. This road, known as the Western Road, quickly deteriorated though with increasing traffic. By 1830, General Thomas Mitchell had initiated plans to build a new, more durable bypass. This project led to the creation of Mount Victoria Pass, which was an engineering marvel of its time. The viaduct at Mount Victoria was constructed from masonry stone by convicts laboring under harsh conditions. The convicts, using crude tools and working with their ankles shackled in heavy chains, endured extreme hardships, and many actually lost their lives in the process. So yeah, amidst this environment, the legend of the Black Ghost of Victoria Pass emerged. The story centers around Caroline James, born in 1827 to a family marred by instability and tragedy, with her father being someone who ran an illegal alcohol business and her mother was an alcoholic who eventually met her grim end. Caroline's mother was found hanging from the rafters of their home, leading to her father's accusation of murder. Although he was convicted, the hanging never took place, plunging the family into destitution. Caroline then found work with the Collett's family, who were prominent figures in the Hartley Vale. There, she caught the eye of William Collett, the black sheep of the family, and they married in 1840 when Caroline was only 13. Her marriage, like her childhood, was troubled, leading her to live with her sister and her sister's husband, John Walsh, an ex-convict with a murky past. Reports suggest that Walsh had a sexual relationship with both sisters and was involved in a romantic arrangement with them. On the night of January 3, 1842, Caroline was seen drinking lemon syrup in a tavern with her husband and Walsh. A violent altercation then ensued, and the next morning, a postman discovered Caroline's lifeless body on the pass. Official reports indicated that she suffered a fatal blow to the head and had been taken advantage of, while some sources claim she was decapitated. John Walsh was then convicted of her murder and hanged in May 1842. However, the local belief persisted that Caroline's ghost was doomed to wander the pass for eternity. The legend of the Lady in Black, as Caroline's ghost is now known, has been part of the local folklore there for over 2 centuries. Her apparition is said to be a headless figure in Victorian black attire appearing on the road and vanishing quickly. Truck drivers and motorists have reported seeing her, especially at night when conditions on the pass are treacherous. Travelers in the 1800s also noted that their horses would become restless near the viaduct, sensing an unseen presence. The ghostly drummer of Edinburgh Castle. Edinburgh Castle, known as the most besieged castle in Britain with 23 attacks throughout Scotland's history, has some tales of unrest and the supernatural. This iconic fortress, which houses the country's crown jewels, has served as a prison, barracks, and a haven for the royal family during turbulent times. This long history of conflict and occupation has given rise to numerous ghost stories. It all starts several hundred years ago when a network of tunnels was discovered beneath Edinburgh Castle, extending along the Royal Mile towards Holyrood Palace. To explore these tunnels, a piper was sent to walk through them while playing his bagpipes, providing a way for those above ground to track his progress. As the piper made his way down through the tunnels, his music suddenly ceased about halfway to the palace. A rescue party was then dispatched, but they found no trace of the piper. The tunnel was subsequently resealed, and to this day it's said that on quiet days the faint sound of bagpipes can be heard beneath the Royal Mile, beneath the castle and palace. Another spectral presence associated with Edinburgh Castle is the ghostly drummer. Although his ghost has not been seen for centuries, the sound of a drum is occasionally heard by visitors. According to legend, the appearance of the drummer is a harbinger of an impending attack on the castle. The last reported sighting occurred in 1650, a year after the execution of Charles I. During this period, strange phenomena were reported around Edinburgh, including meteors resembling swords streaking across the sky and spectral soldiers riding horseback over the nearby hills. Castle sentries also reported seeing the ghostly drummer playing his drum along the battlements each night. The drummer, who was reportedly headless, was believed to be a grim reminder of Charles I's fate. The castle governor, intrigued by the reports, then decided to investigate the whole phenomenon. While he never saw the ghost himself, it's said he heard the drum playing an old Scottish war tune accompanied by the sound of marching feet. Reportedly, these ghostly sounds moved towards and then past the governor. The sighting of the drummer also coincided with Oliver Cromwell's siege of the castle in 1650, which lent more credence to the legend. And the castle is also said to be haunted by the spirits of prisoners from the Napoleonic Wars. In 2003, construction crew members working on the restoration of the castle claimed to have been harassed by these ghosts. Photographs taken in the Queen Anne building during the restoration work showed hazy blue orbs floating above the workers' heads. Some crew members were so disturbed by these occurrences that they refused to work alone. Nana-chan in the Mirror. The legend of Nana-chan in the Mirror is an urban legend from Japan that revolves around a supernatural entity named Nana-chan, who is said to appear when her name is chanted in front of a mirror. According to the legend, those who see Nana-chan's face are believed to be cursed or doomed to meet a tragic fate. The urban legend has been passed down through generations in Japan and has become a well-known spooky tale among children and teenagers. The central tale begins with a young child who often felt lonely exploring an old ancestral house in a rural village. In the southwest area of the house, a cluttered storage room became a playground filled with various objects. One day, the child found an old, worn-out mirror with no frame or handle, just a circular reflective surface. Despite its age, the mirror reflected surroundings clearly. While playing with the mirror, the child saw the reflection of a girl. Startled, they turned around but found no one there. Realizing that the girl could only be seen in the mirror, the child was initially creeped out but soon grew accustomed to her presence. The girl in the mirror had long hair and fair skin, always smiling at the child. The child named her Nana-chan and they began to talk. Despite the parents' concern about their child spending hours staring into an old mirror, they did nothing about it since Nana-chan was invisible to anyone else. One day, the child confided in Nana-chan about feeling lonely and wanting friends to play with. Nana-chan suggested that the child could come to her side of the mirror, although she didn't know how it could be done. After a while, Nana-chan returned with a solution, urging the child to join her on the other side, but warning against telling anyone about it. Fear and anxiety then grew in the child's mind about what awaited him on the other side of the mirror. Days turned into months and years, and the child never contacted Nana-chan again, eventually leaving the house for school and starting a new life. Many years later, now an adult, the child returned to the parents' house. After a disturbing encounter with the mirror, where they saw the storage room door appear ajar in the reflection despite being closed in reality, the adult was haunted by memories of Nana-chan. Returning to their apartment, the adult saw Nana-chan's reflection in the car's rearview mirror, looking exactly as she did years ago. Nana-chan expressed sadness and asked why the adult never returned. When the adult explained the responsibilities and upcoming parenthood, Nana-chan seemed to understand, but stated she would play with the unborn child instead. Tragically, 2 days later, the adult's wife had a miscarriage, and they never had children again. Flaming Go Ship of Prince Edward Island. So this legend, obviously from the name, comes from Prince Edward Island and centers around a spectral vessel that is said to appear on the Northumberland Strait, with its masts and rigging engulfed in flames and moving at impossible speeds before simply vanishing into the mist. Reports of the ship date all the way back to 1786, with sightings continuing in the modern era. One of the earliest and most well-known accounts of the Flaming Go Ship comes from 1900. Basically, a group of sailors in Charlottetown saw a ship on the horizon with white sails and crew members climbing the masts to escape the growing flames. The sailors launched a rowboat and raced towards the burning ship to rescue its crew, but as they approached, the ship simply vanished without a trace. This account, like many others, has been passed down through generations. Another one comes from the 1950s, which revolves around a couple in Glengarry who reported seeing a fully rigged ship sailing down the Northumberland Strait, completely engulfed in flames. The wife pointed out the burning ship to her husband as they prepared for bed. They watched in awe and fear as the ship moved swiftly through the water before disappearing from view. Their story was later recounted by Edward D. Ives, an American folklorist who was collecting local legends. Ives also spoke to a fisherman from Campbellton who had seen the ship while out at sea one night. Despite trying to approach the burning vessel, the fisherman found that it always remained at a distance, never allowing him to get closer. Also, something interesting is there's very little consensus on the origin of the ghost ship or why it continues to appear. Some speculate that it's an omen of an approaching storm, blown in on a northeastern wind. Others suggest it may be the spirit of a pleasure craft that caught fire during a drunken brawl, or an immigrant ship bound for Quebec that was struck by lightning and set ablaze. Roland H. Sherwood, in his 1948 book Story Parade, offers various theories, including one involving pirates setting fire to a religious ship carrying nuns and priests. Sherwood's work, along with other local folklore, has kept the legend alive. In 1905, William Francis Ganong attempted to provide a scientific explanation for the Go Ship. He suggested that the sightings could be attributed to St. Elmo's fire, which is a natural phenomenon where atmospheric electricity creates a glow around objects, often seen on ships' masts. However, this explanation did not account for the ship's sudden disappearance. Other theories include the crescent moon setting on the horizon or a complex mirage known as Fata Morgana, where layers of warm and cool air create distorted images. Despite these explanations though, many locals prefer the supernatural narrative. In a recent account from 2008, a Nova Scotia newspaper published an account of a teenage boy who saw a white and gold ship in Tatamagouche. The boy described the ship in detail, noting the flames and the crew members running about the deck. Old Pali Road. The Old Pali Road in Kailua is home to several urban legends that have terrified people over years. One of the most notorious tales is the one of the half-faced ghost. According to the legend, this ghost is the spirit of a teenage girl who was brutally murdered and taken advantage of, with her body left to decompose in the bushes along the desolate road, strangled with her jump rope, a toy she always carried with her. Those who have encountered the ghost report seeing a young girl with long black hair skipping rope as she floats down the road. The sight is disturbing, but even more horrifying is her face, or rather the lack of it. Her cheeks, nose, and mouth are missing, leaving only her eyes, which bulge from their sockets. It's said that scavenging animals had eaten away part of her face before her body was discovered. Now, she's doomed to wander the Old Pali Road forever. In addition to the half-faced ghost, the Old Pali Road is the setting for several other strange and eerie stories. Another legend warns against carrying raw pork over the Old Pali Road or nearby Pali Highway. According to this tale, anyone who attempts to do so will experience car trouble or an accident. Some people have reported that a small white dog visits their car once it breaks down. The dog is said to grow in size until the offending pork is discarded or the passengers urinate on their own car. This belief is linked to the turbulent relationship between Pele, the goddess of fire, and Kamapuaa, a demigod who was half man, half pig. The two agreed not to visit each other, and taking pork over the Pali is seen as an affront, causing her to stop the car from crossing into her domain. One particular account involves a group of friends who decided to drive around the island instead of returning to school after lunch. They took the road, and despite their initial lighthearted mood, the atmosphere quickly changed and they all fell silent. The oppressive feeling grew as they continued, with each turn in the road bringing a heightened sense of urgency to leave. When they finally reached the end of the road and merged onto the freeway, one of the girls looked back and saw a dwarf walking out from the Pali Road. The sight was inexplicable as there were no homes or other cars in the area. And in 1986, 4 airmen from Hickam Air Force Base decided to test the legend by taking a pack of bacon to the Pali lookout at midnight. They walked down the Old Pali Road, and after about 30 minutes, one of the men got stuck on a muddy cliff while climbing. A helicopter rescue was then called, and the pilot noted that a tea leaf plant considered to ward off evil spirits had prevented the man from falling. This incident reinforced the belief that pork should not be taken over the Pali as it attracts restless spirits. New Brunswick Haunted Hotel. The Algonquin Resort in St. Andrews by the Sea, New Brunswick, has been a prominent feature for over a century. Built in the 1800s, the hotel capitalized on the booming economy and prime coastal location. Its architecture, with pointed red roofs and a black and white Tudor facade, hints at the legends contained within. The hotel's early advertising slogan was "an incomparable resting place," a statement that has taken on new meaning over the years. One of the most notable aspects of the Algonquin Resort is its reputation for being haunted. The hotel acknowledges these ghosts on their website, reflecting their significance to the hotel's history. A fire in 1914 though nearly destroyed the original wooden structure, sparing only the painter and kitchen wings and the iconic tower. This tower is known for mysterious flashing lights and occasional sightings of a woman in a white dress. But something to note is that the ghosts of the Algonquin resort are not the result of horrific events, but rather stem from the affection that many guests and staff had for the hotel. One of the most famous ghosts is a bellboy who continues to show guests to their rooms. He tells them about the property before disappearing without accepting a tip. Guests, though, are encouraged to leave a gratuity on the bell desk for him. Another ghost is a night watchman whose footsteps and jangling keys are heard as he makes his rounds, maintaining his duties even in the afterlife. There's also a senior staff woman who is seen setting and rearranging tables in the dining room. The ghostly guests have darker stories though. Room 473 is said to be haunted by a phantom bride who weeps. Theories suggest that her fiancé was lost at sea, unable to attend their wedding, causing her immense sorrow. And some believe she died of a broken heart. The Algonquin's history section even notes when guests claim to never want to leave, we take them seriously, as quoted. A child who chased a ball out of a third-floor window is now seen and heard playing in the halls. Other disturbances include reports from rooms 308 and 373, where objects temporarily disappear from the fourth floor and doorknobs turn by themselves on the second floor. Staff members have also received phone calls from dead lines and empty rooms. Despite these occurrences though, the hotel assures that all spirits are friendly, if slightly unsettling. Spirits of Spring Villa. Spring Villa, located on Lee County Road 148 in Opelika, Alabama, has long been associated with ghost stories and paranormal activity. The Gothic architecture of the house, with its pointed gables and wooden millwork, adds to its eerie reputation. The house was originally built around 1851 by William Penn C. Young, who had returned to the South after participating in the California Gold Rush. He married Mary Godwin, the eldest daughter of John Godwin, who was a prominent builder from Columbus, Georgia. The house's design is believed to have been influenced by Horace King, a freedman and master bridge builder who worked closely with John Godwin. He married Mary Godwin, the eldest daughter of John Godwin, a prominent builder from Columbus, Georgia. The house's design is believed to have been influenced by Horace King, a freedman and master bridge builder who worked closely with John Godwin. Spring Villa's most famous legend, though, involves the supposed murder of William Young by a vengeful slave. According to the story, the slave hid in a small niche in the staircase and attacked Young as he ascended, stabbing him on the 13th step. However, historical records show that Young died of natural causes in 1879, long after the abolition of slavery, which cast doubt on the legend. Despite this though, the house is still believed to be haunted, and visitors have reported various paranormal phenomena over the years. During the 1930s, when the estate was used as a 4-H camp, campers were told ghost stories about the house. Visitors have reported seeing figures in the upper stories and hearing unexplained voices, music, and footsteps. Some have also felt uneasy or even claimed to feel hands pushing them on the 13th step. And something to note is the Alabama Paranormal Research Team has conducted multiple investigations at Spring Villa. One account involves a camp counselor named Magic Mike, who reportedly saw a man playing the piano in the empty house. The director of Opelika Parks and Recreation found him sitting on the floor, crying and in shock. The team also discovered records of 3 young girls who drowned in a lake on the property and presented evidence including EVPs, or electronic voice phenomena, and video footage. Southern Paranormal Research also investigated the house and grounds in 2008. They suggested that some of the reported phenomena might be due to matrixing, where the mind is fooled by the interplay of light and architecture. They also noted that sound carries well throughout the house, which might explain some of the noises heard by visitors. During their investigation, they experienced odd occurrences like hearing things in the woods and seeing a large shadowy figure on the road. They recorded EVPs, including a growl and laughter, possibly from a child. Gloucester Ghoul. The Gloucester Ghoul, a creature rooted in the folklore of northwestern Rhode Island, is known for its terrifying presence and bizarre appearances. Descriptions of the ghoul vary, but it's generally portrayed as a large beast with a ram-like body, bat-like wings, and large horns on its head. Its eyes are often said to emit a fiery glow, and it's sometimes described as having skills that make a rattling noise as it moves. This creature has been part of local legends since the early 19th century, with one of the most notable encounters involving the infamous pirate Albert Hicks. Albert Hicks, the last person executed for piracy in America, was born in Foster, Rhode Island in 1820. His life of crime and adventure was marked by fascination with tales of buried treasure and notorious figures. In the summer of 1839, Hicks and 3 companions set out to find Captain Kidd's treasure, rumored to be hidden on Page Farm in Gloucester. Equipped with shovels and picks, they began their excavation under the cover of night. As they dug feverishly for the elusive gold, they were suddenly interrupted by a strange sound. Emerging from the dark forest was a Gloucester Ghoul. Hicks described it as a large animal with eyes as big as pewter bowls that glowed like fire. Flames then shot from its mouth and nostrils, scorching the brush in its path. The creature was as big as a cow with bat-like wings, spiral horns like a ram's, and feet like a duck's, measuring 1.5 feet across. Its body was covered in large scales that rattled as it moved, and it had lights on its sides like those shining through a tin lantern. The men all dropped their tools and fled in terror, never to return to claim the treasure. The ghoul, though, was not seen again until 1896 when Gloucester resident Neil Hopkins encountered it. Basically, on the evening of January 13, while walking home from work in Putnam, Connecticut, Hopkins heard a sound from deep in the forest. A supernatural creature then charged from the darkness and began to pursue him. Hopkins described it as a large, fire-breathing beast with a metallic clanking sound accompanying its movements. The creature chased him only a short distance before plunging back into the woods. Hopkins' account was then reported in the January 15 edition of the Evening Hour, sparking renewed interest in the legend. Despite these encounters, though, there's no concrete evidence to support the existence of the Gloucester Ghoul. Skeptics suggest that sightings may be misidentifications of known animals or outright hoaxes. However, the legend still persists, and some speculate it could be a previously undiscovered species or a mutated animal, while others suggest it may be a supernatural entity or an interdimensional being. Aroma. Aroma is a figure in Nigerian urban legend and is often depicted as a headless hair braider with a reputation for styling the hair of unsuspecting victims. This entity is believed to be a spirit that roams the streets of Nigeria, particularly in the southern regions. According to folklore, Aroma is a vengeful entity that seeks retribution against those who have wronged it in the past. The legend describes Aroma approaching individuals, typically young women, and offering to braid their hair. Once the victim agrees, Aroma begins weaving an intricate pattern with a sinister twist. The process of braiding is said to put the victim in a hypnotic trance, rendering them powerless to resist Aroma's control. As the braiding continues, the victim's hair grows longer and more entangled, symbolizing Aroma's increasing hold over their mind and soul. This ritual is believed to be a form of psychological manipulation, with Aroma feeding on the victim's fear and anxiety. Those who encounter Aroma are said to be cursed, experiencing various terrifying consequences, including hair loss, mental instability, and even death. In some cases, victims are reported to become minions of Aroma, forced to roam the streets in search of new victims to avoid the spirit's wrath. To protect themselves from Aroma, Nigerians often take precautions like carrying protective charms or talismans, wearing protective clothing, or avoiding isolated areas at night. Some believe that sacred symbols or prayers can repel Aroma, while others think that offerings of food or drink can appease the entity. The origin, though, is kinda unclear, but it does have deep roots in southern Nigeria.